Us on this wet, cold, rainy winter morning. We started a few minutes late just knowing that we may have some stragglers because of weather and traffic. Thank you for your patience with that. My name is Michelle Giovinazzi, and I'm the director of the Center for Executive and Professional Education. My role today is really just to welcome you and to tee off to our presenters today, but I just wanted to say welcome, and I'm always curious to know, how many of you have been to CEPI, as we call it, the Center for Executive and Professional Education, before? Super. How many of you may have attended one of our programs or participated in one of our programs? Great, great. So about half, third to half the room. For those of you who are new to CEPI, our function within Portland State University is to offer short-term, career-focused, intensive programs for mid-career professionals. So we offer certificate programs in a number of areas, 16 areas right now that you may see on our website. We offer custom learning for businesses, and we bring learning resources to the business community. And today is an example of that. We offer digital marketing breakfast as well as other events that are always listed on the events page of our website, and we're always happy to have you. Today we have the pleasure of having an event led by our marketing partners and gurus, Mambo Media, and to kick that off today we have Susie Jeanette. Thanks, Susie.
Thanks, Michelle. I am so excited about today. This is going to be a really great topic, so I hope those other folks that are headed over here get here shortly, because you have a really incredible panel here. And most important is that data and analytics is the future. It's the future of marketing. It's the future of so much. So whether we like to be in this highly inundated big data world, it's not really a choice anymore. We have to embrace it. We have to learn more about it, and we have to understand it better. On that note, I have a little anthropology lesson for us. I studied anthropology in college, and it's still a passion of mine. So way back when, a few years ago, we dealt with small data. So for the last thousands of years, we were hunters and gatherers, and we had small data, right? And so we had what was called confirmation bias, right? So this means, for example, if we heard a noise in a bush, and other big noises in a bush, we would assume that's a bear, and we would run away, okay? That's confirmation bias. That's our historical understanding of what a big noise in the bush means, okay? And for hundreds of thousands of years, confirmation bias was actually our friend. Because even if we were wrong 1 in 99 times, we ran away from the bush and we got away from the bear, right? So these days, we're dealing with big data, okay? So we apply our confirmation bias to this, and we say, ooh, big noise in a bush, I need to run away. But, uh-oh, it's our prospects. We're running away from our prospects, okay? So just very simply, we need to put away our confirmation bias, because in the big data world, we actually don't have the brains to compute effectively. We just don't. We're not set up for that. We may evolve to that, but right now, we don't have those brains. So while we do have brains to make subjective and good decisions based on data, big data, we need the understanding of what big data is implying. We need to understand what it's saying to us and how to actually synthesize and come up with a non-confirmation bias direction. And so that's what our esteemed panel today is going to be talking about, is how to take that big data and really use it for whatever your goal is, right? Either talking to prospects or understanding what's working and what's not, what's effective. In the marketing aspect, it's usually, how to better attract, engage, and convert. So that's what our awesome panel is going to be here. So no confirmation bias, people. They're going to talk about the X in the confirmation bias. So our panel today, we have Lars Van Schniederen, and he's a data analyst at Home Depot. So he's got a lot of big data that he's working with. Really excited to talk to him. And then we have Naira Perez. Naira and Mambo and I have worked together for years and years. She has one of those incredible brains that do left brain and right brain. So she's highly analytical, but she gets the marketing world, and that's actually what we hire for, because you have to have that subjective side along with the objective, so that you can synthesize and make good decisions for your clients or for your customers. Last but not least, Bill Kent, Director of Demand Generation at Acton Software, which is a marketing automation group out of here. Actually, and he's going to be talking about digital nurturing. So we really got the whole spectrum of analytics from start to finish. So I hope that you will enjoy these folks. And Lars, we're going to kick it off with you if you're okay with that. All right.
Should I stand or should I sit?
I'm going to give you the little forwarder, so you can do whatever you want. And you are, awesome, making me hungry. By the way, please help yourself. We've got an amazing spread of coffee and pastries. Beautiful. Okay, let me make sure.
Yeah. Cool.
Great. Thanks, Lars.
January 2018 digital marketing breakfast. Pretty good, isn't it? I don't eat breakfast, but I'm really happy to be here. So thanks for having me. If you want to find me on any of the social networks, that's usually what I go by. So feel free to shout at me. All right, so what's up? I'm going to talk about who I am for a little bit, then I'm going to talk about frameworks, and then more frameworks, and then more frameworks. Anyone who's been an analytics consultant within the marketing space probably knows what a framework is and how to use it, but if you don't, it's where you start to think about how you organize your data around what your goals are. And then I want to ask us, the royal us, who are we really working for? Who are we trying to do all these things for? Is it our client, our customer, or is it the person they're trying to reach? Fast forward to, it's the person that they're trying to reach. Then I want to go back and talk a little bit about the skills that I go back and learned earlier. Some of you are probably coming into analytics new and have heard a lot of things like Python and R and so on and so forth. So just really, really briefly, what I would do earlier if I could go back. Cool. I'm Lars. Lars is my real name. I work for Home Depot's Quote Center. You've probably heard of these guys. They just announced this morning that they're giving a $1,000 bonus to all their hourly employees as a part of trying to promote the tax cut. But what's Quote Center? That's probably not something that you've heard of before. We are essentially an in-store quoting and selling application used by the associates in stores to sell to pros. So people that are going to renovate your house, fix your basement if you get any flooding. They can buy stuff from Par Lumber. I'm sure you've seen those trucks around town. Or they can come to us and get more stuff through one quote with more discounts. So we are a software company up in Vancouver. We've grown from 50 people to 150 people in the past 9 months.
Wow.
I'm a part of that wave, and we're hiring like crazy. So feel free to go to quotecenter.com, and you can learn about who we're hiring for if you're looking for a job. But before that, I've been building and leading analytics teams for quite a while, mostly in the agency space. So I've been working in digital and experience-focused agencies for about 10 years now, before going legit and working for the big orange. Several of the agencies I used to work for aren't around anymore, which is really interesting to see how things change. And some grow, and then some are not so grow. Okay.
Don't say that about us.
Okay, great. So here's my tweetable quote, because everybody has one. The experience you create delivers what your ad promises. So this is something that I kind of thought of. This doesn't have to do with data necessarily, but if we think about what we're doing, we're trying to sell, we're trying to convert, we're trying to do all these things, but ultimately what we're trying to do to get there is to create some kind of experience for the user, for the customer, or for your prospects, whatever, whoever your targets are. If you don't have those experiences to deliver what your ad or your campaigns are going to promise, then that's only half the battle. So whenever I think about data or using data, I think about not just how I measure how my ads are performing, because I want to optimize those ads and make sure that I'm reaching the right people, that I'm getting the right click-through rates and all those cool things. But once they land in my experience, what can I do to make sure that it's the right experience, that they're doing the right things, and so forth. So that's my little coin. Okay, let's talk about frameworks. So you'll hear phrases like KPIs. Does anybody not know what a KPI is? A key performance indicator? It's you're trying to do something, you have a goal, you're trying to make $1 million, you're trying to convert X number of people. That's a goal. But to get there, there's things that they do along the way. There's some kind of key indicator of success. That's usually something like they click on a certain number of things, or they download a PDF, or they fill out a form. There's something that is in between those. But those tend to be things like business objective. Your customers are just trying to get information about your product. I can't count the number of times that I've gone to a website or some kind of experience just looking to see, does this thing do this one thing that I'm looking for? Because I really need to find that one thing. Instead, I'm going through page after page after page after page of just how cool we are, but I just need to know if you do that one thing. So, old joke, college websites, there's what the college website does, and there's what the college website is for in terms of what a student is going there for. The address is the only thing that's common between those two things. College websites love to tell you about how great they are, but they're not useful because the student just needs to know where to go or like when their classes are. So, anyway. So when we think of frameworks, usually from the business side, we have a list of what we're trying to do. We're trying to increase leads to dealers and drive sales. This is an automotive client. There's all kinds of things that I'm trying to do to get there. And all these things, they're called goals here, but they're actually KPIs. They're key indicators of success. This represents weeks of meetings and whiteboards and discussions and stakeholder. There's a lot of stuff that goes into coming up with just this list. And this list, it was 3 or 4 pages, but it had to be condensed down. So. The thing to take from this is that when you think about the business and what it's trying to achieve, you have to really be very both high level and think about what your objectives are, but then also get really specific. You're trying to increase web registrations. What does that mean? And then from here, you want to define what that means. What's the click, or what's the event, or what's the point of data that I'm going to use to prove that this happened? Since I only have about 15 minutes, I can't get into a ton of detail here, but this is the business level context. But then what happens when you think about your customer? But we can look at data to see what they're trying to accomplish. We have top 6 reasons that people call into a call center. Top 5 things that they're looking at on the poolsite.com. That's obviously not me. So what we start to see here is that people call in because they just need to update their address, or they need to find that stuff from their account, or they need to know how to pay off their lease. Is that stuff that we're talking about here? Kind of, but not really. So how do we combine both sides of this into some kind of thing that shows that the business is accomplishing what it has set up to do with that experience? And the customer can also do what it's supposed to. So some of these things are a little high level here, but are people satisfied with the experience? Are the touch points or all the things that are going into that experience, is there a cohesive thing? If there's a mobile experience, does that force me to go to some kind of web experience at some point in the future, or can I do all that with the mobile experience? That's a really, really big thing, is forcing somebody to complete a task on some kind of browser-based experience as opposed to a mobile experience. That's a big no-no. You don't want to do that. So again, this is just a really, really kind of weird example of the fact that here's what you're trying to do, here's what your people are trying to do. How do you find some kind of middle ground where those two things come together into things you can actually measure and that show value for both you and your customers. And then the trick is, how do you apply that to your people? Personas and journeys. Are we familiar with those terms? We have a whole talking session about that, but you have different archetypes of people, different kinds of customers. There's a whole process that you go through to define who they are. They have different stages in their journey as they engage with you. How do you start to map all these things to what your different personas are trying to accomplish? Because your customers, each one's a little bit different. You can get super granular and see what this one guy is trying to do and make sure that you're going to fill his need. But there's also probably tens of thousands of people that look a lot like him that are trying to reach also. So mapping your KPIs and mapping your goals to your personas is something that is not only a really good idea, but I would say in this era where pretty much everybody knows what a persona is, and how to map customer journey. That's one of those things that's become table stakes. It's not like a cool thing anymore. So as an analyst and as a thinker, you have to be able to map those goals and those KPIs against those personas in the journey. Any questions about that? All right, so what about data? There's animation. So since I don't have a ton of time, I can't get super deep here, but typically what you see when you get into some kind of new situation is that you have lots of different sources of data. You have a CRM, you have some kind of web analytics like Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics. You have a CMS or a content management system. You have some kind of testing platform. You have an ad server. You have an email platform. And each of them is kind of ad hoc talking to one another. One of the big things that is not only starting to really happen much more, but is something that people like me have been talking about for a long time, is that what you want as digital marketers is not to chase down all these siloed locations for data, like how many clicks on my email, how many visits into my web experience, how many leads am I generating, but to create what I sometimes call an experience data platform or a customer data platform that takes all these things in, has a common key or some kind of unique identifier that can say that this person, I can find them here, I can find them here, I can find them here, they came in through a certain source, I'm using some kind of testing software, and I know who they are through tying together their common key between the CRM and the CMS, and that all that is cataloged and kept into some kind of experience or customer data platform. Here's another view into what that looks like. You have different stuff. You can match these people. That's all put into one kind of platform, whether it's just a simple database or whether it's something off the shelf. There's a company actually in your town called Analytics. They make a customer data platform that does a lot of this stuff, and it's off the shelf, and it's really, really low touch, and does a lot of these kinds of things where you can start to predict their next action based on all the behavior coming from all of your experience platforms. You can start to deliver content and personalization based on the segmentation you have within that platform, and do reporting based on that. So the idea is you, as marketers, want to have a data platform that you manage that's not necessarily tied to IT. And that's a whole different thing that we can talk about, is how you can pull data out of IT and get it into your marketing space. That's a big, huge topic. This is the same thing, but just, this is, we observe things based on things like marketing automation and clickstream analytics. We can personalize and test. We know things about people based on their voice of customer. How do we get all that into one place so that we can do visualization and do things like journey analytics and tie that to some kind of business intelligence, IT-based stack so that they can do other things with their data as well. I'm being super vague because I've just done it. Okay, so let's talk about what I do differently. If you don't know SQL, probably should. It's really, really easy. And for those that don't know, SQL is a querying language. You have a database, you have a table. You can select multiple rows with a certain criteria, join it with another table, join it with another table, and then push that someplace else. That's a core functionality of actually using data. If you're an analyst and an actual analyst and actually working with data, you have to do some kind of querying, and SQL is the most common way to do that. So definitely pick up some SQL if you haven't. Do some stats and some maths. Even if you're not a statistician, you could say that we're all statisticians now, we're all data scientists now, we're all content managers now, we're all everything now, full stack marketers. If you don't know some basic stats and maths, that's definitely something that you should be doing. For doing programming and scripting, Python, it's easy. You can do a lot with it. There's thousands and thousands of libraries that are devoted to using Python to learn and to see more into your customer and your data. Talk to account people if you're in the agency space. Talk to the account people. They know what's going on. They also like to drink, so I take them out to drink. Talk to developers. They also like to drink, and they know what's going on the other side. If you're in a space where you have the dreamers that you have the big ideas but don't know how to do it, you have the developers that know how to do it but they don't know what's going on, be the bridge. Be the person that can be the gateway between those two worlds and you'll be successful. Don't take yourself too seriously. We're all people. I have fun, that you should have fun. This isn't work. I mean, it's work, but this is just marketing. It's not like work. Super important. That's it. Any questions? I was going to say, so we have a Q&A anyway. So,
yeah,
yes,
we'll be doing a panel Q&A at the end of this.
Yeah.
So,
cool.
Thank you very much. All right, Naira next. Yeah, you are. Excellent.
Okay, so my name is Naira Perez, and I worked with Susie. It was such a pleasure to work with her. I worked with her many, many years. And now I founded Spring Hill Digital. It's who we are. We specialize in paid media and lead nurture with emphasis in search engine marketing and social paid media. And our mission is to practice science-based approach to digital marketing that builds relationships between brands and customers. And I actually highlighted a few keywords there because that's our approach to data. We practice, that means data is always objective, data is always there, but how you approach it depends on the client, depends on the problem you're trying to solve. And constantly we're learning and relearning. It's like yoga. You go to yoga and one day one position comes out great, and the next day it's totally different. Science-based, again, because we play with data. Data is objective. A 3 is a 3 every time. However, what is the question that you're trying to answer? What is the theory that you had beginning of that journey that you're going to embark with data? That's where the process is very important. And then brands and customers, it's all about relationships. Even with data, it's so interesting because there are key moments that you're going to find out where clients are ready to dance with the brands. We say in Spanish, I'm from Spain, and we say two do not dance if one doesn't want it. So how do you get people to dance? How do you get the brands and customers to dance together? It's the relationship. So I was at yoga, I practiced yoga, and I saw this on a t-shirt. And I thought, that's brilliant. A balanced diet is having a chocolate bar in each hand. Of course that's a balanced diet. So I created my own t-shirt. See, I don't have a quote, Lars, but I have a t-shirt. And I will wear it if anybody wants to print it for me. A balanced strategy is having data on one hand and tracking on the other. And it's true. I mean, you cannot have one without the other. Data that is not connected, data that you don't know where it came from, data that is just numbers, means very little to you. So why tracking is important? So this is my personal story, how tracking is important in my household. So I come from Spain, and my grandparents were very Catholic, and one side of my family, my mom had 7 siblings, and my dad had 11. So I had 18 sets of uncles and aunts. And I have 2 kids. It's totally different. But I have to manage that relationship. My kids are here in the United States, and my family is back in Spain. I want to create a relationship. I want them to feel that they're part of the family. So in holidays and special events, some uncles and some aunts send gifts, some others send thank you letters. Some kind of forget. So it's my job to manage that relationship, to know where did this card came from, where did this gift come from, and what is the appropriate response that my kids should have to that. And who should I nudge next time? Like, hey, Christmas is coming, you know? Just call them or something of the sort. So it's up to me. So that's how data tracking is important. If I messed up all the cards and I didn't know who sent it, $5 gift certificate and who sent it 100, then I may be doing the wrong thing. So it's the same with businesses. What is tracking to businesses? It's building appropriate relationships. It's building the right relationship. Who visits your store? Whether your store is a website or your store is a brick and mortar store, doesn't matter. The same principles apply. where did these people come from? What did they do in my website? Did they buy? How much? And most importantly, why? And going back to that science approach, how can I duplicate that? How can I make it happen again if it was a good experience? And if it was not a good experience, if they didn't do what they were supposed to, why? Why? How can we improve it? So now I'm going to talk about 4 real situations where data saved the day, or could have saved the day. So I got this email, and the first question is, do we know why sales are up this month? Has something big changed? How many times have you heard that question? A lot. Or you've had that question, like, all of a sudden something happens, like we're doing great, or we're not doing that great, but we don't know what happened. So the web developer for this company actually sent this to the owner and said, our daily sales are through the roof. They increased 258%. And we've made more in 12 days than the last month combined. But I don't know why. So at the point, actually they weren't. At that point, they weren't a client. We were just talking, introducing each other. And so she sends me this email. I'm like, she's testing me. This is a test. They do this to everybody. Let's see if we find the answer. For me, it's always a challenge. Whether they were a client or not, you ask me a question like this, I'll dive right in. So at that point, we only have access to their Google Analytics. And so I'm like, I'm going to start with a question. Did this happen any time before today, before this time frame? Has it happened before? And where did it happen? So I go to Google Analytics, and I can see there is, every January to December for the last 2 years, every January to December, there is an uptick in traffic. And while I'm there, I also notice that traffic in general is up. So those are 2 things that now I know. Now I'm starting to form a theory. My theory is this is some sort of seasonality that they had not noticed before. So I start looking at other parts of the puzzle. So data is a puzzle, and whenever you have proper tracking, the puzzle matches perfectly. So in this scenario, I actually went to Google Trends. In Google Trends, I look for that keyword that really defines their industry, and then look at how the rest of the audience that is not related to my client have done. And you can see, for the last 5 years, from December to January, there is always an uptick, and it's a big one. So, okay, my theory is starting to make even more sense now. There is a seasonality here. There is a key moment in time where that audience is ready to listen to the message of this company. Then I looked at other factors that are social influences that may affect the industry. And when I put it together, which is called Analytical Strategy, is to look at the client's data, look at the target audience behavior, any other social influencers in the industry, and then you look at the dependencies. Are they matching? How are they related to each other? Then you have an analytical strategy. Now we know for the next campaign, for the next paid media effort, I know that December through January, that audience is ready to listen. So, needless to say, they're a client now. Because they weren't really happy with that. We explained their problem. The next one is, always breaks my heart a little bit whenever a client comes to me and says, well, paid media doesn't work for us. I was like, oh, okay, I'll take that challenge too. I'm gonna see why it doesn't work for you. It normally is not that paid media in general doesn't work for them. It's just the pieces of the puzzle are not there in the proper order, or they're just not being looked at completely. So in this case, the ad is in Spanish. You don't have to learn Spanish. You just have to. I mean, if you want to practice it, that's fine. Go ahead. But in this scenario, you can notice that the landing page for the ad is the home page. What if Amazon did that to you? You look for shoes, and then you see an ad for those beautiful shoes, and then you go in and, well, here is Amazon, just now find it. Just go for it. Find it. No. You're going to get lost. It's like you have a date with somebody, they're like, where should I meet you? I want to see your apartment. Oh, okay, here is the address to the building. Now go find me. Go knocking on every door and just find me. It's not a proper way to start a relationship. So, I mean, not everybody that comes to your website will know exactly where to go. So not all who wander are lost. But some people that come from paid media, or from email, or from a very, very dedicated strategy, if you send them to homepage, they're really, really lost. Because they were expecting to find something else. So back to the case study. So you can see how here, this is people that landed in the landing page through paid traffic. Anytime you see red, it means they dropped. They just gave up. So in the first try, 327 people came, 151 just said, forget it. So the rest tried to go in, and then tried to find out where they should go. And so this really, it's a path from Google Analytics. I call it the map to the land of the lost opportunities. We have 327 people that click on our ad, and we gave them nothing. Only 3, look at this, only 3 actually found their way on the second try, on the second. So overall, that's a 0.9% conversion, which, depending on which website, that could be bad or worse. So, no, this idea is saying good. So, where should they have gone? The missed opportunities that when people through paid media, because that ad had extensions, so they did find their way. Whenever they landed on reservations directly, they converted at 6%. It's actually more than 6%. When they landed on a product, they converted at 2 to 3%, which is, big overall industry standards. It's not that bad. We could improve, but that's fine. So they could have had 4 times more conversions. That's something that for paid media, we will consider making the ads, and now we know where to drive people. So that experience, that relationship is built in a much better way. Your first impression will be much better. Another thing that I hear is paid media doesn't do anything for us. It's just not big traffic. We have more from organic and direct traffic than from paid media. So this is my iceberg effect. The iceberg, the top is really small, and then the majority of the iceberg is below the surface. So this is what happens. That, yes, you look at your traffic, and those are conversions, and you can see the big bubbles come from organic search and from direct. Yeah, I'll give you that. Besides, not everything. There is a poem that starts with, all that is gold does not glitter. So there is gold out there that is not glitter. And when we look farther into paid search in this case, you can see that it assists a lot of other channels in their conversion. So, okay, not everybody converts directly. Not everybody sees an ad and comes in and boom, buys. They see an ad, and then they look for you organic because they remember the name. It's like, oh my gosh, I remember that ad. Or, guess what? Then you send them an email. They may be in your target audience in your email list, and they're, oh yeah, I saw that ad. So they start in one place, and then they convert in another. So you cannot just look at the last step. You have to look at the entire picture. That's where tracking is very important. All your data needs to match. Imagine you call somebody, hey, let's go out. And that person says, well, maybe, I'll call you back. And then that person looks at Facebook profile, your Facebook profile, calls their friends, looks at your LinkedIn profile, is doing a lot of things. So you call them the second time, and you're like, hey, let's go out. And she's like, yes, let's go out. And you're like, my second call did it. No, your second call didn't do it. It's all the things in the middle. Yeah, you may have the roll bowling, but the ball needs to roll nicely. There is all the steps in the middle. So that's how it goes back to relationships. You're building a relationship through the customer journeys that Lars mentioned. So, and this is the most common one, like who can I affect through advertising and where should I advertise? Whenever people are thinking about paid media, especially Facebook or LinkedIn, It's like, who is there and how do I talk to them? So this is a case study of a client that we followed for a year. They had a primary audience, in this case, named Target Audience 1. And their target audience, it was not responding. They weren't getting what they really wanted out of paid media. So we introduced a secondary audience, similar but not the same. And we saw that after a year, actually the secondary audience was doing much better. Why? Because just studying more information, that secondary audience was more adapted to the technology that they were using. They were using mobile, they were just very, very digital savvy. The primary audience was not as digital savvy. So, okay, now we take that audience, the primary audience, and maybe we do some PR for them. Maybe digital is not yet their channel. But the secondary audience is working really well, so we're going to optimize. But even when you look inside that secondary audience, when you see something really interesting there, those are costs. So the bigger, the worse. So Bing and AdWords, excellent channels. People that come from there, the audience that comes from those channels actually convert so much better, and they're so much better quality. So if you were just looking at the surface, then you will see LinkedIn as a channel that you don't want to go in for this audience. But guess what? Data, you always look inside a little bit more. There is more questions that you can ask. Is LinkedIn working for us in any way? So when we analyzed LinkedIn, actually, we found out that LinkedIn is great as a branding channel. The cost of reaching people in LinkedIn, the right audience, was much lower than actually Bing or AdWords. And that's the right audience. It's just that they're not ready to convert yet. Not the right moment, but it's the right audience. So what we can do with this channel is build a brand as a thought leader in their industry. What we can do with this channel is build followers that we can then nurture, build email lists that we can then reach in the future. So you can see here the dips in data actually are whenever we stop or reduce our advertising. Our followers, the followers that we were acquiring, actually drop. They drop every time that we took paid media out. Our organic followers stop following us. So why followers are so important. Don't go out and buy followers, please do not. But followers that came through the proper content, through the proper relationship with the brand, actually once we reach out to them afterwards, we have a campaign exclusively for followers, they click through our ad much higher percentage than any other audience. The demographic audience is people that may or may not know us. So you can see how much more responsive, not only that, but they actually interact with us. We have conversation. 21 people in this case actually comment on our ads or engage in any way, share or like. So that's important because you're building that relationship. So one last thought, going back to our mission, which is our approach to digital marketing and paid media. You practice, you have a methodology that is science-based, you have a process, and then you change it every time, according, or you modify according to the problem, according to the client. All these clients were different. Some of them were B2B, some of them were directly to consumers. And then it's all about relationships. It's about that dance between brands and customers. You want them to dance together, you want them to enjoy it. Thank you very much.
Okay, Bill.
Good morning. So I'm not going to talk about myself too much. I'm just going to jump into it. So what does it mean to be data-driven? I think that term's thrown around a lot. Something to think about is being data-driven versus data-informed. A lot of people talk about being data-driven. but actually what they're doing is looking at what happens after they've done some sort of marketing activity versus saying, how do we use data to inform what we're going to go do? So one of the things is I took over as the managing director. I was really trying to build data-driven culture, and so what that meant for me was, continuous discovery and testing. Like never assuming that we know our buyers and we've got that figured out. It's not building personas and putting them on a shelf so they can collect dust, right? Ongoing communication with the market, always learning, always testing new things, and just having that curiosity. You have to put measurement on the agenda, right? So if it's important to be data-driven, that means you need to talk about it. So everybody needs to understand the metrics you're driving towards, those KPIs, kind of like what Lars talked about, right? How are we trending on those? And they need to be on the agenda every time you guys meet to say, how are we doing? What's working? What isn't? That type of thing. Also, channel agnostic. So I know this is digital in here, right? And there's been an explosion of new digital channels and opportunities and data. And we all have our favorites, right? Susie talked a little bit about confirmation bias. One of the things is if you kind of come in with a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? But really you want to try to say, let's go out and look for our market, for our buyers, for different folks. Just because they're on Facebook, for example, do they want to engage with us there? Right? So being willing to kind of test different channels and tactics and figure out what's actually going to work best for us. We have a limited amount of resources. I don't care what company you are, the resources are limited. I went to a conference in New York a few years ago, and a lady from Volkswagen was there, and she was like, yeah, for this launch we only had $2 million, right? And I almost fell out of my chair. I was like, that's like our entire budget for the whole marketing team, employees and everything, right? And this is just one campaign, right? But for her, that was limited resources, right? So she had to figure out how to use those. But ultimately, there's lots of things that can be successful. And so if you're looking at what's working across different channels and always testing, then you're going to find that your dollars are spent in a certain way. And that means being willing to admit what's not working. And that's particularly important with the sales team, right? Trying to come in and say everything is rosy and look at all the retweets we got and all the clicks we got and all the leads we got, that's all great, right? But if it's not actually driving revenue for the business, I think the average tenure for a CMO these days is 18 to 24 months, and the reason is because they go focus on a lot of other things, and at the end of the day, if you don't take care of revenue, you're not going to be around, right? So if the company's growing and marketing's deemed as successful and driving leads and revenue for sales, everything else is going to kind of take care of itself, and you get to do some of the more fun stuff. So. And then also, I kind of talked about this a little bit already, but really getting down to that cost per, that holy grail of cost per lead, cost per qualified lead, cost per acquisition, right? So the dollars we spend, how far can they go in these different channels, and is there things we should stop doing because we can put the money in a different place, we can actually drive more. So what you commonly see though is in most organizations, whoever's the highest title or is the loudest in the room, that person's opinion wins, right? So I don't have a tweetable quote or anything, but I can steal someone else's. So there's an outfit called Pragmatic Marketing. They do a little bit more on the product marketing side, but they have a quote that's, your opinion, although interesting, is irrelevant. And the point is that it's about the market, right? So that's awesome that you feel this is what we should do. Let's test it, right? So and also, I kind of talked about this before. Everyone sort of has their favorites and their comfort zone. I worked for a marketing director one time that we'd be talking about a campaign, and at the very beginning she'd start talking about the paper that she wanted to use for the direct mail piece and how it's recycled and how there's this and this side, and I'd be like, whoa, back up. Like, who are we targeting, right? We have 3 different personas, completely different. We had 60-year-old architecture and engineering firm leaders. We had 20-something project managers. We had billing managers that were 40 to 50 years old on average, right? These are completely different people, but she wanted to jump right into the channel and what it looked like and what are we going to say and all that. Hey, let's back up and figure out who we're targeting first, then we can sort of let everything else flow down. So she wanted to stay in her comfort zone, I guess. It's the thing. We all have those. So it takes pushing yourself and trying new things. So kind of at the crux of this, for me, is building a best customer profile, ideal customer profile, whatever you want to call it. And this is different for every company, right? But kind of what are those key attributes? For us at Acton, where I work now, we want to see people with a job level of director and higher. So director, chief, something like that in the title. And then, of course, be marketing, right? We can sell to other people, we talk to other people, but ultimately those are the things we're looking for, right? For us, we're looking for companies that are 10 million to 1 billion and in 5 key verticals. So this is information that you want to be thinking about. How do you gather that? And so I kind of have some collection methods down on the bottom. You need a combination of all these things. So while you're gathering some stuff on your online forums, and that's a good thing to always be thinking about, is what's the least amount of information we need to gather kind of over time, but what's the key stuff that we can gather on forums that we can't get anywhere else, we can't buy somewhere else and add to the record. So if you could say, for example, what's your top marketing challenge? The person tells you what their top challenge is, you use that information to then feed it to sales so they know what to message, use it in all your marketing messages and everything like that, right? So there's some creative ways to use forums in that way, but it doesn't stop you from still needing to do, focus groups, one-on-one interviews. Normally what you find, you do 5 or 6 interviews with a certain person, and trends start to emerge, right? You start to hear some of the same things, and you can look for some patterns. For us, we also want to know things like, what's your, do you have a competitive product in use today? So since we sell marketing automation software, if you're using HubSpot or Marketo or Pardot or one of these other things we want to know, and then what's your renewal date? So that's an example of something we try to gather on forums kind of later on, so that once we know that, then we can sort of set 6 months out. What's our plan to try to convert somebody over to a customer? So then some example, things to look at. Lars talked a little bit about business objectives and whatnot, right? These are the same types of things you want to gather for your customers. What are your personal and professional goals and aspirations? So anyway, hopefully this deck can be shared so you guys don't have to try to take notes and all that. Here's the challenge, right? So for most people, you're looking at maybe 10% of your market is looking to buy. So what do you do with everybody else? Right? So you go to a conference and you get a handful of people, a bunch of people drop their business cards in a fishbowl to win something, right? A handful of those people want to talk to your sales team right away. But for everybody else, what do you do? How do you get more value out of those leads and that engagement you've generated over time, right? So that's where nurturing comes in. And so just a quick stat, right? Companies that excel at nurturing generate 50% more sales leads and at 30% or 33% lower cost. So kind of the why behind that. Another part of the challenge, though, here is that as online's happened, a lot of people have seen the data out there. Oh, people are 80% of the way in the buying cycle or 50%, whatever. You can go find the stat that you like. But the point is that people do take different routes. So in this case, both Ben and Beth might start with a web search, but they can go in completely different directions, right? So on the one hand, whereas Ben goes to a product page and is looking at the product itself, Beth might be looking for an ebook about some best practices to solve a certain challenge that she has. And then they take completely different paths. And so what you're trying to do with your data, of course, is set it up so that you can gather this information about what they're doing, and then send them the appropriate message over the different channels over time to try to eventually convert them both down to becoming a customer. But people, this personalized journey is one of the biggest challenges. So just some common nurturing challenges. People kind of do them one-off. I mean, when I took over as managing director, there was lots of different nurture programs happening. There was not really kind of an overarching strategy. There was sort of nurturing happening in the display world. There was nurture happening in email. There were some campaigns that were being done with sales. We really didn't have kind of like an overarching cross-channel strategy. And that meant that data was sort of sitting in different places. It wasn't very cohesive. And then, another common challenge, of course, is just a lack of relevance and ongoing testing to really make sure that you're driving what works. A lot of people kind of set it and forget it and never really go back because they're too busy running to the next thing. But ultimately, what you want data for is so that you can have the best messages, get the best response, drive the most engagement, right? That's the point. So if you're not looking for relevance, then you're probably not going to have as much success as you could otherwise. So here's an example of just, there's a lot here, but I wanted to show you an actual lead flow that I put together for Acton when I took over the demand gen role. So for us, somebody comes in and we're looking at, are they already a qualified lead? Do they have the lead score that we want? So we're kind of evaluating that. Are they a good contact? That's going back to they have the job title and the other things that we're looking for, the types of company. And have they shown any product interest? If not, okay, we might need to nurture them more at the top of the funnel. Try to provide value, share some more content, gather some more information, try to interest them in the product over time, right? The point of all this kind of is this is your top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom funnel. And you want to try to progress people through that, but you got to kind of meet them where they're at. So I might put them in a top of funnel program here, and I'm still looking for, do they do some sort of qualified engagement? Does their lead score go up so that data point happens? Does sales make a change on their record in some way that would cause me to then route them down here? If I can send them something segmented that's more relevant to them, maybe it's industry specific, maybe it's role specific, whatever. You always want to do that first. But I also like to set up kind of bigger catch-all campaigns. You can sort of bucket people into these and make sure that you're talking to them over time. I talked before about you go out and generate these leads. It costs money to go to events. It costs money to spend ads on digital and all these other things. And only percentage of the buyers are actively looking to buy. So this is where this whole nurture process comes into play and how you try to nurture people over time. And at the end of the day, I mean, I'm in B2B, so it's more of a considered purchase, but you can't do anything without sales, right? You have to always be thinking about, hey, sales, here's what we're doing. Here's what the emails look like, and here's where you follow up, and here's how we're going to notify you, and having that whole service level agreement about how we're going to work together. The ideal here is to try to get to more than just one channel, right? That cohesive strategy. What I showed before was mainly just an email program with some alerts to sales, but I want to kind of show you some ideas on scaling up from there. One of the easiest things is just combining doing a message match with display and email. If you're hitting the person both on display and email, you're going to see higher click-through rates, engagement. You even see stuff like when salespeople call or salespeople email, they get a higher response rate. So display ads don't always get the best engagement rates if you look at the click-through rates and stuff. What you often see is if you're targeting someone with display ads, whether it's remarketing or just directly targeting them, they'll often engage more on email. They'll often answer the phone more for salespeople. So you have to kind of look at other indicators, not just the display ad. But you do see that on both, if you do the same message in multiple channels, you'll often see a higher engagement rate. So here's an example of a nurture flow where we're trying to gather information over time and then kind of examples of ads that we would serve, right? So right within kind of the nurture flow here, let's say somebody goes to one of our pages about account-based marketing. That's a topic that they're interested in. Now I can automatically remarket them, and say, hey, here's a new book about that topic that you care about, right? Trying to be relevant to what they're looking for. Let's say I find out a piece of information on the forums. We'll often ask people, what is your CRM? Do you have Microsoft Dynamics, Salesforce, whatever? And then we'll message to them about others like them, whether that's industry-specific, CRM-specific. If they get further down in the pipeline, and we know they're actually evaluating marketing automation in this case, what we sell, then we'll talk about, hey, we're a leader with Forrester Wave. Come down with this report, kind of see us stacked up against all the competition, right? So more relevant as they get further down. And once you become a customer, it's not over then, right? You have to continue to let them know what's going on. So for Acton, we rolled out a new university and community, and so we were remarketing to our customers to make sure they know, hey, this is there. Come check out this new resource. And that helps with, of course, retention and getting more people using the platform across the organization. So put together and I use the most random animations too. So just to kind of get into more of this multi-channel approach, right? This is pretty simple, but if you're just doing email, display, and kind of targeting them on social, and these days, it didn't used to be like this. You'd have to go to kind of special companies, but now even AdWords will let you upload a list of email addresses into their platform, and they will target them around the web. So they will try to find a match. You usually get 25 to 30% match when you do that. But it doesn't take a rocket scientist anymore, some special platform or whatever. You can do it right through Google. Of course, there's others out there like Terminus, etc., where you can do targeting. So it doesn't just have to be somebody that came to your website that you're remarketing. You can actively go out there and target somebody. But here's kind of an example approach that we sort of use that it's pretty simplistic, but we've got the target companies we're going after, and we know who the people are. So of course we're emailing them, we're targeting them on display. And we're also doing LinkedIn and other social ads to target them specifically on those platforms. And then, of course, we're trying to mix in phone calls as well. So kind of moving along, you get some engagement. Now what? And again, this is just an example of kind of what we put in place early on. We'll do a direct mail piece if it's the right person at the right targeted account. It'll come from a salesperson, something short, sweet, and simple, but a personalized message from them. Then emails, phone calls, emails, just kind of working that same mix. If that person becomes qualified right away and agrees to a sales meeting, then we'll look at sending them something better in the mail. So we'll spend $50 and send them some sort of high value offer, and then of course continue with emails. Now salespeople don't always want you to email folks that they're trying to sell to, but that's why you have to kind of go to them and share, here's what we're going to do, and you try to keep that brief. We have kind of a 3-email program only for the bottom of funnel folks that salespeople are trying to sell to. And it's just real simple. Here's the 3 messages we want to help you underscore as you're going through that sales process. And they can opt people in or opt people out. So quick example campaign, this is from when I was at an agency before joining Acton. This is from a company in town called Crowd Compass. So for them, they had a lot of competitors who were saying, hey, yeah, we also do that. We also have these same features. They sell a mobile app for events, and there wasn't a lot of customer loyalty, so they were kind of seeing like year over year, they weren't really retaining people. If they had one thing go wrong at their event, the next year they just go get a different platform. So they really wanted to kind of figure out how can we stand out above the rest. And so of course, we had to start with who are your customers, who are these different personas, and what are these different types. And so they had personas of, hey, we have an event planner, we have like an association event planner, right, these different folks, but it was all pretty surface level, I guess. And what we tried to do is go a little bit deeper and try to understand a little bit more about each of these people and kind of create a fun interactive experience, right? So we used data to inform what we were going to go do. And the point was that we wanted to drive high engagement. We wanted to gather some insight about them. So we had kind of creative questions on this interactive quiz where we were saying stuff like, if your marketing budget was a car, what type of car would it be? And the first option was like, a car, I got a rusty bike with no seat. Right? So we had unique ways to have it be fun and gather intel. If they selected that their budget was the sports car, right? Then that's an indicator to the sales team, hey, this is somebody I should call sooner. And then ultimately, since this is top of funnel, trying to drive engagement, trying to help get them differentiation in the market, they knew they were going to have to nurture these folks through the process to ultimately convert them into revenue. This ended up being their top lead gen asset for 3 years in a row. And the marketing leader that we helped work on it with, she won all sorts of awards with CVN Corporate and everything back in DC. So we ended up putting together a couple more, but this was by far the one that was the most interesting, I guess, and drove the highest engagement. So this is an example question. So we tried to do something a little bit more fun, just put some kind of basic pictures in there and stuff, but make it look a little bit more interactive. And based on what people are selecting here, we're actually putting them into persona buckets. Based on the type of event marketer they are. So here's kind of the four we came up with, and we try to create like one sentence guiding light statements for each one, right? So based on what they select throughout the quiz, then we'd say, hey, you're the natural, you're the trendsetter, you're the maestro. And that sort of led to a series of emails and messages. If you were to actually go to the site and fill it out, you'll start getting drip emails, and then they'll actually offer, hey, you want us to send you some stickers? And it says, Bill is a maestro, and they'll actually send you the stickers and like mugs and other stuff, right? So they really kept the campaign going after that. And so just showing you a little bit more, we had kind of an 8-email drip program, so just kind of a simple approach here. Short and sweet, always works better. Try to keep it to two, three sentences max for our emails. That's what we find drives the most amount of engagement. So some examples of some different display ads we did. This was kind of the first wave. Over time, kind of did some more stuff and kept testing. But this, sort of the multi-channel approach here, right? So we had even social cover photos as well. So kind of their background for LinkedIn, Facebook, everything like that, right? So this is a full-fledged campaign where they're actually like, hey, we're going to roll this creative out. We're going to update our social profiles. This is kind of the thing we're going to try to engage the market with to help create that differentiation. And they did a couple other channels as well, some better than others, but you get the idea there. So to wrap up here, so data drives relevance. Again, at the end of the day, it's all about being relevant. That's what's going to drive engagement, right? So data is great, but it's more about what you do with it, right? So early stage, when somebody initially starts to engage with you, I kind of showed, hey, if somebody's interested in account-based marketing, we're going to message them about those things, right? So that's kind of topics of interest. And based on the page they go to on your website, whether it's a blog post or what asset they download or what they're looking at, you can infer what they're interested in, right? And send them relevant information. I talked about how, on forums and whatnot, or your salespeople can gather this as well. But figuring out what people's challenges and goals are, that pain and aspiration, and then being able to message to them, hey, here's somebody else that has the same challenge you do, and here's how they overcame that, right? So more on the early stage. On the later stage, like I said, kind of continuous gathering of additional insights and personalized. So that can be data that you acquire, that you kind of append to the records. Like I said, don't be afraid to ask, whether it's on forums. I kind of wrote the exception there as BANT, which is budget, authority, need, timeline. Salespeople would love for us to ask folks that on a forum, but if you've ever had that before on a forum, it's not a pleasant experience to be like, hey, do you have the authority to make this purchase? Like, am I not relevant if I don't, right? So don't be afraid to ask questions though, and even separate from forms, right? Ask people information, gather key things that will allow you to really personalize and drive that relevance and boost your results with your nurture. So that's what I have.
Wow, thank you so much, you guys. That was incredible. So I imagine there's a few questions, and we have some time. Anybody want to kick this off? Yeah?
Do we have any kind of a benchmark or level to which what percentage of the marketing budget should be allocated to online? Or do we have any kind of benchmark percentage?
There are things out there. I can't quote them off the top of my head, but I know like Marketing Sherpa has some. There's a few different sources. So if you email me or whatever, I'm happy to send you some stuff. So yeah.
It also depends on the client and on the company, and also depends on the industry and what are you trying to achieve. So although that is a very common question, like how much should I allocate, in my case, how much should I allocate to LinkedIn versus Facebook, and how long should I run? So those are very big variables, and so the rule of thumb would be the more money you invest in one channel, the sooner you will see results. The less money that you allocate, the more you have to wait to get all the data, because it's all about getting that data and making meaningful sense out of it.
I guess I would say though that that's kind of the beauty of digital, is that it allows you to test very quickly and figure out what works, whether it's messages, etc. Right? You can go out and buy ads and drive people to them. So what we do at Acton is definitely we have certain things. So at the end of the year, we always do kind of a start, stop, continue. So, what are things that we think we want to start doing? Are there things that aren't working that we know we want to stop? And then what is working that we want to continue doing and carry over, right? So we have a certain amount of our budget allocated at the beginning of the year, but we're purposely setting aside a good chunk of our budget to say, hey, when we're going to go out and test some of these new things, if we figure out something's working, we're going to double or triple down on it, right? So there is definitely some benchmarks to kind of guide, hey, what's the mix like? Absolutely right that, I kind of talked about, it's great if your buyers are on Facebook, but do they want to engage with you there, right? So, that's where the testing comes in to sort of figure out what works, and then, then I'd say the benchmarks are off. At that point, it's all about your market, your buyers, right, and what's working.
What is the general timeline we use to test to understand if it's working or not? Is it a 3-week or 6 weeks?
It's more about the number of people that engage, right? It's more about, so Lars would probably be best to answer that one, since he's the one who recommended we take stats classes.
Yeah, so there's 2 parts to it. There's the number of samples that you have, and the magic number is 350, but that doesn't really mean that's enough though. Quite often what happens is that you'll do a test and you'll start to see some numbers coming in, and there's a very, very large difference between those 2 experiences or 2 ads or whatever, but then as time goes on, they start to narrow out. So my rule of thumb is 2 weeks, because then you're starting to remove things like seasonality of different days of the week, and saturation of the messaging also. So don't trust that first day where you're like, wow, it's a huge difference. You have to really kind of wait for something to really settle in, because people might be exposed to the ad but not click through until 2 or 3 exposures. So you want to understand the whole picture and not just the initial first days when the first comes out.
Thank you.
Yeah, and ad networks especially, they push ads to certain types of audiences the first couple days, and then it changes over time. So.
Also, make sure you're not advertising during a period where your results will be skewed. As an example, during Christmas, or for my client, during December to January. Although that's the best time, your results may be inflated, or your lowest time. So you have to place those tests very carefully.
I have one. We talked about confirmation bias, and we talked about that opinion, while lovely, doesn't really matter, right? But the challenge that we have is that those higher up on the decision-making ladder typically have the most confirmation bias and the least experience with real analytics, synthesis, and assessment. So how do you help those at the top that have those typical confirmation bias, how do you help bridge the gap for them so that they will actually do what probably their middle manager understands from folks like you is the right thing to do?
Do them both. See which one wins. So the thing you're talking about is what I call the HIPPO, the highest paid person's opinion. And start there, because I mean it's not good to fight against that, but know that you're going to advance upon that based on what you're seeing coming from the data. But what always happens is that, and especially when you're trying to design a new experience, is that you have a series of ideas. You have the idea that came from the HIPPO, you have the idea that came from some kind of research that you had from a couple of years ago, then you have a few more ideas from the actual people that know what they're doing. Some of those ideas will kind of mix and merge as time goes on. Certain ideas will hit the floor. You'll start out with the experience that you come to at some point towards the end, but then you want to start to test all those ideas that didn't make it into the experience once you get there. And eventually what you'll find is that there's the right combination of storytelling and wordsmithing and colors and layout that will eventually get you what you're trying to do, but it could take a while to get there because you have to try and test all those ideas to make sure that it's the right experience for you. And who you thought were your customers or who you thought were your personas aren't always who you actually attract and who you end up getting the most value from, and being open to be wrong about your assumptions is also a very, very important thing. Because once you start to have a catalog of your new customers and people that are engaging with you, you can start to do what's called a cluster analysis, if we're talking actual stats, where you can see how people tend to group themselves based on behavior and based on what they're doing. And you'll see these patterns emerge like, okay, these people look very much like these personas that I've identified, but there are these kind of fringe cases that are starting to emerge and get more popular that I had no idea existed. Let's figure out what they're doing and some kind of qualitative conversation with them to know who they are, what is the fringe case, because no matter what you do, people are going to figure out some way to use the thing that you're building in a way that you didn't expect, and that's really interesting.
So whenever you're talking to people that may or may not understand data, they understand they need it, they don't understand how to use it or what their potentials are, what you need to do is talk and present things with low barriers of entry. So if we're trying to test a new channel or test a new audience, let's start small first. Let's see, it's low risk, let's do it. And let the data and the results actually show the way. So that's how you can convince somebody. I understand you think, and I've had this conversation many times. In many instances, we start with, give me as a word. That one, it's just the most common one. Okay, well, let's try this. These are my reasons, and you present your reasons, and you match those reasons with their goals and objectives. That person wants to succeed as much as you want your program to succeed. So can we match them? And then for the things that we do not match on, let's present little bites. It's just like having somebody that doesn't like a food. Just try a bite. You may like it, you may not. Then no problem. It's low risk.
Can you tell she has little children?
I'm not equating high executives with little children, but it's the same way. So, and then once you have approval, once you can do amazing things with that data. And that's how, as an example, in the case study that I presented, that's how we got into Bing. That client was not used to getting outside of AdWords. They had tried LinkedIn, but Bing was an unknown. And it seems like nobody knows about Bing, but Bing is, let me tell you, amazing. So we tried a little bit, and guess what happened? Those leads are giving them the most revenue per lead. So, okay, I was right, let's do something else. Now they're hungry, now we're trying different things, and that is good. We started small, now we're expanding.
Does Bing still pass through search term, or do they obfuscate that now in Google?
I think they still, I mean, I cannot confirm right away, but our campaigns are very traditional. When we are doing campaigns, we actually match what we're doing in AdWords very well. So, yeah, we just copy that because the experience needs to be the same.
So I guess I would say that's kind of what my first slide was about a little bit too, is sort of trying to establish a culture, right? So when I took over as the managing director, there was a lot of people doing a lot of different things. There wasn't kind of, everybody was sort of doing their own thing, and there wasn't really this kind of culture of admitting that things don't work, of testing, of saying, hey, that's a great idea, let's try it out, right? And then reporting back and saying, hey, this worked and it didn't work, right? Like I said, there's only a certain amount of resources you can spend, so kind of trying to explain to executives that, hey, what we're trying to do here is figure out where can we get the most bang for our buck, right? What's going to drive the highest ROI? So love the idea, let's test it, right? Let's see if it works, and if it turns out it's successful, then we can allocate dollars from over here into doing more of that, right? Because there really are kind of only three things you can do, as a marketer. Maybe there's a fourth, maybe somebody else can come up with one, but it's like doing more of what works already. That's kind of like your throughput, just doing more of it, right? This is working, let's spend more dollars here, let's do more emails, let's do more calls, whatever that is. It's improving what you're already doing, so that's optimization, right? And it's trying something new. So the reason the last one's important, of course, is because just because something works for a little while doesn't mean it's going to work forever. I had a client, Minter Graphics, at the previous agency I was at, and they spent a ton of money on AdWords. And they would, when I go down there and meet with them about different programs and stuff, I just can't spend enough money on AdWords. If we could get more people to search, right? And it's that classic challenge I talked about of the number of people that are actively looking for what you sell, right? About a year later, I was kind of asking them, so you guys still doing all that AdWords? No, it stopped working. It isn't working as well, right? And you find that with events too. There's certain people that go to events, or there's certain people that answer their phone. I never answer my office phone, right? But there's certain people that are phone picker-uppers, right? If you keep calling the same group of people over and over again, you're going to kind of, eventually nobody's going to pick up the phone on that list anymore, right? So over time, you go to events and, you start to see 25–30% of the same people there year after year. Good from a branding standpoint, but from a lead gen standpoint, you might start to see a decline over time, with that strategy. So even though that might have been something that worked well in the past, you got to constantly be saying, is there another event? Is there another effort? What else can we try? Is there new things that would actually be more effective use of our dollars?
Right. Yeah.
So I'm curious, once you guys pull that data, what tools are you using to organize it?
That's a great question.
Out there.
It depends.
Okay.
Yeah, I like to be hands-on with it. So as much as I can get into a SQL table, because that's what I'm comfortable with. If you're not comfortable with directly accessing the data, you need to have some kind of center of gravity when it comes to understanding the customer or the prospect. Usually a CRM is that thing. So Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics, that tends to be the thing that can ingest the most other things you can learn about those people. So they interface with all the other things in your stack, like your marketing automation tools or your email tools and so forth. So that's usually the place to go to. And then it's just getting comfortable using that as a resource to manage how you qualify your leads and qualify your customers, set up rules around what kind of campaigns they're going to be exposed to. But I'm a huge advocate of taking control of your data. If you do have developers who can work with the marketing team to specify requirements around some other kind of data platform that is managed specifically for the marketing efforts that can start to build out and not be restrained just by one platform, that's ultimately what I'd like to do. And the other benefit of that is that once you have more of a accessible, open thing, then you can do more types of really kind of neat analysis, kind of like that cluster analysis that I mentioned. If I know 5 things about my prospects, if I put those into a field and start to see how people are clustering themselves on those things, then I can start to learn about them more on a more systematic basis, not restrained by just what my CRM can do. So I'm a huge advocate of developing your own platforms that either you as marketers manage or have some kind of devoted resources for. And there's tons and tons and tons of new platforms out there that are coming up. Snowflake is one that I've used a lot in the past. It's a non-relational data system. You can just throw as much stuff in there as you want to and do a lot of management through a GUI instead of having to do all that work yourself on a more technical basis. There's literally new platforms that come out every month.
Yeah, no surprise, I love getting my raw data too. So I download it, so in paid media, if you're doing Facebook advertising, LinkedIn advertising, you can use their platforms. They do have good interactive charts, and but if you download the data, you get way more information that they may have selected not to show you. So you can download that information in Excel if it's not huge. If it's huge, you can use like R programming as well. So I don't do Python. That's fine.
R is really great too.
Yeah. But and then there is visualization tools, so you don't have to deal with Excel as well. Tableau is a very simple platform that you can use to input data, manipulate it, do the relational database, much simpler concept, and then present it in a way where people that may not be comfortable with data actually understand it. And
Even hippos.
even hippos. Even hippos. So I'm just going to remember that. That's going to be my tweet for today. So yes, pictures are always good to present data as long as they make sense.
And they have a story.
They have a
Storytelling
story.
is super important.
And colors.
Yeah, don't just give somebody a table, tell them a story, and then if they ask for the data, you can show them that
Yeah.
table. So,
Where I'm sure Larry are like, I want the table. But I was like, wait a minute. But yeah, as a storytelling, get the raw data and then present it in pictures.
I can't think of what we don't use. But we do use, as Laura said, like kind of our CRM as our single source of truth. And one of the reasons is it's great to pull data out of other places, but ultimately you want to see what's the impact of the pipeline. And where does the pipeline live? It lives in your CRM, right? That's where the opportunities are, all of that. So I'd say first and foremost, use Salesforce campaigns. You can pass lots of data in there from a variety of different sources. Salesforce connects into everything these days with their, with their app store and whatnot. So we kind of start there. I personally can't write SQL code or Python code. I like having guys like this around. So, kind of the moniker of you can do anything, but you can't do everything too, right? So it's awesome that, to have folks who can do that. For me, we have marketing operations folks that, my job is to make sure we're getting all the data in there, it's getting collected. We've got the query strings that have the right parameters. We've got, everything's going into Salesforce campaigns. We're getting data from all these different sources in there. After that, they'll pull it out and use tools like Tableau or SizeSense or other ones like that. Of course, at the end of the day, people still fall back on Excel all the time, right? So
there's nothing wrong with this.
don't be afraid to use Excel and, tap someone else on the shoulder and ask them to build your pivot table or whatever.
Pivot table. Okay, we have time for one more question. Yeah.
Yeah, well, my name is Rafa, I'm from Spain, so if I have a strong accent, maybe Naida can help me with that.
Are you one of her answer uncles?
No, so, well, first of all, thank you because the meeting was great, and your presentation also as well. So my question for you, I come in from the sports marketing world, so maybe I am very romantic with the marketing. But my question for you guys is, how do you work in your companies, the analysis data team with the other teams like creative, marketing, designers, and developers and everything? Because to me, the most important challenge that the companies have in the future is inspire the people or inspire the consumer. Because before, you have the relationship between the person and you in front, like face to face. Right now, you only have like a screen. So I think that the company that they are going to mark the difference is the company that they're going to inspire the consumer. And that's why right now, the phone calls, the emails that you say before, they are not working very well, and no one is looking the spams and everything. And right now, there are another virtual tools like the marketing influencers, and these kind of people are working very well because they are like inspiring the consumer, and also the consumer, I think that they feel like they trust this guy, like can be an athlete or it can be an actor or whatever. So my question is that how do you work with the creative staff in your companies, and how do you inspire the consumers?
That was a fantastic question. It really is. So,
En español.
I'm sure, I mean, you will appreciate it. So, from a data point of view, we can see what's making them inspired. And that goes beyond looking at clicks, beyond looking at sales. We can see engagement. And if you pay attention enough, you can also see what kind of comments are they doing. Not only how many times that article was shared, but what are they saying about it. So digital marketing is not only paid media, it's also organic. Is pay attention to what's happening around you. There is always a conversation happening around a brand, whether you're part of it or not. So pay attention to what conversation is happening. So the way to translate that for creative, like I used to work in TV advertising, and I used to work with infomercials. So people will call, people will order, and we will know exactly where they call from, what station they were watching. But not only that, we didn't only live in call and orders. We listened to the scripts and listened to the tapes. Remember tapes? And we used to modify our scripts and how the customer service or the telemarketer was responding to that person according to what had succeeded or not succeeded. And then we will go to the creative people that develop the ad and say, we're not approaching these pain points. Something that we have not talked about that you can really analyze is pain points and moments of readiness for a customer, for an audience. So I was taught that you cannot create a need, you can only highlight it. So that need that the customer, the audience has always had, can you highlight it? Can you see it? Can you identify it through the creative? Did I touch that point? Did I make clear that I was solving that need? If I did it, then great, we do more of it. If I didn't, if I missed the mark, then we go back to creative. And then we talk to them about, hey, this didn't work. Whenever we talked about price, it did. Whenever we didn't talk about price, it didn't. Well, price is something that they take into consideration. So, and the same with developing new audiences. So every team has something that they care about. And so you have to really analyze the ad and the brand and the messaging according to what they can do. So go back to data and use it correctly for the right reason.
So that's a great segue back to when I showed the confirmation bias. It wasn't to say that you can't ever bring humans into this. And this is a perfect example of we need the whole team. It takes a village to inspire and engage and convert. So one of the challenges we are seeing is organizational structures and governance. Like who's talking to whom and when and why. Because traditional siloed companies are really feeling the pain of, well, my marketing ops group is doing all sorts of things over here, but they're not really listening to my creative people, and vice versa, right? So, and don't forget the sales guys who are on the front line all the time. So Naira just illustrated, like, we had to go back to the scripts. What was really happening in that moment of truth, or moment of opportunity, that tipped them over, you know? And if we don't know that on the digital side, we'll keep doing the same thing that we think is working, right? So we have to inform, and we have to create a culture that informs. And so that's often done under governance or making sure that organizational structure actually works, bringing everybody to the table. I hate to end this. This is riveting. Can you guys stay for a few minutes to answer further questions? I have to go, but I do want to say, I didn't say this at the top, I teach in the digital marketing certificate. I'm a huge fan of it because it really brings it down to earth, what's really happening. We bring in case studies of clients and what's going on right now, and as you all know, it's changing every 30 minutes right now. So it's a great way to keep your finger on the pulse, also get some real world experience through other people who are servicing clients and anywhere from small to large scale enterprise brands. So I highly recommend you looking into that. I know Michelle is going to also tell you about.
In addition to that, I know we have data scientists in the room, we have digital marketing experts, but if today left you wanting more and wanting to learn more, in addition to our digital marketing strategies program, we also just launched a data analytics program. That talks about data mining, data analysis, understanding data, visualizing data. What is data today and how can you use it in any kind of work that you do? So I highly encourage you to check that out if that's an area of growth or an area that you want to learn more about. Our first class launched this week and was full. We'll be running another session next fall, but they don't need to be taken in sequence. So you can look and see if any courses are of interest and let us know if you're interested. Thank you for your time today. Thank you to Susan. Thank you so much to everyone.